As we speak, world leaders are gathering at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And just a couple hours ago, they started their discussion on the so-called two-state solution ahead of the meeting and the start of the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah. The nations of Britain, Canada, Australia, and Portugal all announced, and I believe France as well, announced their formal recognition of the so-called two-state the state of Palestine. So what can we expect to see from the United Nations this week? Joining me now to discuss this, Dr. Jonathan Schanzer, Executive Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He is also author of the book Gaza Conflict 2021, Hamas, Israel, and the 11 Days of War. Dr. Schanzer, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, I was told you just returned from Germany, where the Palestinian state issue was the focus of meetings there. What can you tell us about what's going on internationally and what we might see in New York this week?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that you need to understand is that this is not a new initiative. This is something that has actually been pursued by the Palestinian Authority since 2005. There was actually a vote in 2012 where the UN saw 138 countries come out and recognize the state of Palestine, or what they call the state of Palestine. That still didn't do anything to further the cause. And the reason why is that this will only matter if it is voted upon and accepted at the UN Security Council. So a General Assembly vote where 193 countries could all vote in favor would matter not even a bit. It has to be at the Security Council, and that's where the United States has a veto. And the United States has vowed to veto this. The Trump administration has said that it is a rewarding of terrorism. It is a rewarding of Hamas for the war that it launched on October 7th. And so, yes, I do expect there to be a number of countries that come out and openly state their support for a Palestinian state, for a so-called two-state solution. But in the end, it will matter very little. There will be some political pressure that will be placed on Israel as a result of this. But the U.S. has Israel's back, and I think the pressure will at some point dissipate.
So Jonathan, is this political theater on the international stage?
Yes. I mean, in a word, yes. I mean, what I think you need to understand here is that most of these world leaders that are declaring Palestinian statehood are deeply unpopular at home. I mean, you see the government in France teetering. Starmer's numbers in England are plummeting. The Portuguese are, I think, traditionally just unstable. So these are all countries that don't particularly have significant standing among their own populations, and they have large Muslim populations who have been speaking out against the war in Gaza.
Let me talk. Let's take UK. Starmer yesterday saying this. Originally, back in July, he said, he laid out conditions. One of those being that Hamas would have to release the hostages. They would have to disarm. No future role in Gaza. None of those conditions have been agreed to or met. But yet he's now calling for recognition of a Palestinian state. And how many states do we have that have no defined boundaries or constitutions? I mean, how often does that happen?
It really doesn't. I mean, and by the way, it's not just that they don't have a constitution. It's not just that they don't have defined boundaries. They don't control arms within their so-called borders. In other words, there are armed gangs that are running around in both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The only thing that they are able to do that would meet the criteria of statehood is engage in diplomacy. So 1 out of 4, not looking real good for the Palestinians here. The last country that was admitted to the UN, just use that as an example, that was South Sudan. They suffered from similar problems, weak governance, armed factions running around, porous borders. And when you look at South Sudan right now, that is a disaster. The Middle East does not need another failed state, and that's why I think this is a real mistake to pursue right now.
Jonathan, I want to go back to your statement in terms of the U.S. Position on this, that they feel that this is rewarding Hamas. I mean, I don't know how you see it any different. I don't see how you can see it in a different fashion, because on October the 7th, they brutalized, they killed, and now we're rewarding them. The international community would be rewarding them with the state. But let's take this a little further. For all of these countries, as you said, that are already a little bit unstable, what does this do to terrorists that may want to focus on their countries?
Look, I think it is a green light for violent factions in Kurdistan, for example, or in other areas where you have people without a homeland. Look, I'm not an opponent of Palestinian nationalism, Kurdish nationalism, or any other people that are looking for statehood. But when you see a group like Hamas launch a war 2 years ago, murder people, 1,200 people in cold blood, and take hostages, 48 of whom have still not yet been returned, this is the kind of thing where you just scratch your head and wonder, why wouldn't they offer statehood after an agreement is struck, after the hostages are returned, after the core components of this conflict are resolved? None of this makes a lot of sense to me right now. But the other thing, this organization is an opponent of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. It makes no sense to me right now why they're doing this.
All right, Jonathan, we just have a little bit over a minute left. The international stage there in New York with the United Nations meeting and the General Assembly, there'll be lots of speeches, lots of things said about this. Is the Security Council scheduled to meet? When are they scheduled to meet, and when will we see potential action on this?
Yeah, I am actually not even sure that there will be a vote. I think you're going to see General Assembly action on this. You're going to see a lot of people come and speak out about this, but everybody knows exactly what's going to happen at the end here. Donald Trump is not going to be swayed. The United States will not be swayed here. And so this is posturing. It's a lot of virtue signaling right now. And there's much more important business to attend to at the United Nations. We've got a war with Russia and Ukraine. You've got snapback sanctions against Iran. These are the things that we should be focused on, not something that we know that's not going to pass.
Dr. Schanzer, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate your insights on what I think is a very important and significant issue. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.